Hello and welcome to Creative Marketing TV. My name is Susan Joyce Schlief. I'm the founder and host of Creative Marketing TV. And I am very pleased to have a guest with me today, Leslie Cardinal, who is going to talk about networking tips. And this came about because I had asked Leslie for some advice before I was going to a big networking event about a week and a half ago. And she shared some great tips with me that were very helpful at that event. And I'm getting ready to go to another event next week. And so I asked her if she'd come on to the show and share the tips with everybody else who may be going to a live event. And I think she has some great ideas, and hopefully you'll enjoy them as well. So Leslie, welcome to Creative Marketing TV.
Well, thank you, Susan. I'm delighted to be able to join you today. I've been looking forward to it.
Good. All right. So before we dive into, I know you have seven secrets, I think, that you want to share with us. Why don't you give us just a little bit of a background about how you got so focused on networking and why people should listen to you?
Oh, great. I'd be happy to do that. Well, I think one of the reasons I've kind of come into this as a topic that I speak quite a bit about right now is that it was always very challenging to me to be somebody who could go to a networking event and feel comfortable and confident. And so I finally decided I'm going to learn how to do this. I just decided really deliberately one day, I bet there's some skills I can learn to be better and have more confidence and have more fun with this process. And so I set out to do that. Another thing that kind of influenced me, I think, was growing up as a kid in a military family. We moved a lot. And it seemed like, we were always going to be at a new place, having to start over as the fresh face. And again, kind of along the way, learn some of the you just got to find a way to jump in and fit in. And so I learned some of it naturally, but then as an adult decided to really get even more serious about it and really learn how to master those techniques, no matter what kind of situation. When I was in a more professional setting, maybe going to conferences, conventions, or even just general social kinds of networking situations, I just wanted to feel more comfortable. And I'm kind of a moderate introvert, not the extreme of that, but it's not my favorite thing to be in a big crowd of people that I don't know, and again, I just didn't want to just feel that hideous sense of dread to go to that. I wanted to feel like I could go and hold my own. And so I kind of set out to learn it. And a lot of my techniques, I think, are especially friendly for people that are more on the introvert side of the spectrum. And they'll work well for people that are more naturally extroverted to actually help them be more able to connect with people and not just be the one that's doing all the talking too. So I love to share ideas that really will be practical wherever you find yourself kind of on that continuum of more on the strong introvert side or more extroverted too. So I'm happy to share some of them. I always like to encourage people, experiment, try them out, see which ones will work for you, and really make them your own, make them fit your style and personality.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Both to see what feels comfortable to me, right, as well as to see what actually draws people out and creates more conversation. Yeah.
And to be sustainable for you over time, for anybody, it needs to be something that'll fit your style. It needs to be, kind of that you can adapt to your way of interacting and being with people.
Oh yeah, that's so true. Because I know the times when I've tried to push myself to be more out there, it's exhausting to try and be something that's not natural.
It is, and I don't want you to come across feeling fake, like it's just not you. Right. So, and really almost that playful approach of, I'm going to try this out, I'm going to experiment, almost kind of gives you a little more lightness with it, as opposed to feeling really serious. I've got to go meet a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. Got to come back with business cards from everybody in the room, that kind of thing. That to me, that's just a big setup to fail right from the start. So I never want to push people to that kind of that type of an extreme at all. So
yeah. Well, I know I've gone to events in the past, where they've had little sessions about networking, and they say, oh, you should get at least 10 cards during this next break, or talk to 10 people you don't know during the lunch break. And this time when I went to this event, it was a 4-day event, I didn't do that at all. I just
Good.
I met the people that were near me or that came up and talked to me or that I ran into at something or another, and we just naturally started a conversation. And there were some people that I talked to pretty much every day because I enjoyed talking to them, and when I'd see them, we'd stop and chat a little bit more. And
Perfect.
others that I talked to one time maybe, but I didn't really. There were times when I would say to myself, okay, so there's a person that's sitting alone. They said something earlier that was interesting. Go talk to them,
Perfect.
But other than that, I wasn't really like pushing myself. It was just whatever felt natural. And I ended up talking to a lot of people and making some good connections.
Awesome. But it sounds like without that pressure or the tension
Exactly.
of trying to meet so many. Well, and really that kind of leads into kind of the first tip I like to share is set yourself a couple of goals or outcomes if you're going to, especially like you were going to a multi-day event. But even when I'm going, say, for example, to like a social mixer that's maybe in the evening, to set a goal or two of and make them small goals, very doable. For example, instead of aiming for 10 people, say I want to meet 3 interesting people tonight. Make it a small number, really doable. And if you meet more, great. But if that's all you do, yay! You've had some success. You walked through the door and made a beginning of that. And you pointed out, I think a couple of other goals that I like to suggest are just have the intention to go and show up, especially for somebody that is a little shy or more introverted. That actually is a big goal sometimes, to just get yourself up and out the door and into the event. And particularly anything that's a big event, like sometimes a conference will have big giant mixers, I mean, their goal is to try and encourage people to mix and mingle, but that can feel kind of overwhelming too. So just go through the door, and then we'll talk about some of the other strategies once you are in the door to help make that more doable.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a good first goal, is to actually show up at the event that you've either paid for or decided you were going to go to, even if it's free. So yeah.
That's right. Another way to set a goal is like at a conference like that, there might be, especially if you have the agenda ahead of time and you know who the speakers are, look down through that list and see, is there a speaker or two that you might like to meet if there's an opportunity? That can be a goal. And a lot of times they'll come to some of the mixers at a conference. Another one might be to set a goal for a certain type of person that you want to meet. I sometimes will set that when I'm going locally to just regular kind of social mixers or networking meeting. And I often tie it to something that's a business goal that I have. Like, for example, right now I'm learning a little bit more about podcasting. And so I might set out an intention to see if I can meet a person or two who either has a podcast or can point me to somebody locally that has a podcast. So almost it's like going beyond whatever the intention of the meeting or the convention is, to have some personal kinds of goals that relate to your own projects and goals. I know anytime I'm in the market to buy some new technology, whether it's a new laptop or I want to think about upgrading my cell phone or something, I like to talk to people and learn from them what are they finding useful, what do they like or not like about theirs, and I'll sometimes take that in as one of my networking goals, to talk to people about whatever that choice or decision is, that's going on in my life right now. And those are easy things. Almost anybody has an opinion and something to share about that. So
yeah, and I remember you said that before. I don't think I really did that at this last one, but that would be a great tip to use at this next event I'm going to, because this one is about social media techniques and tools and things like that. So I'm going to make a note to ask people what apps they use for their social media graphics and videos.
Oh, that's a great one. That would be a good one, because that's right up your alley. It's something you love to do. You have a lot of passion, and you'll have something to share in the conversation about that too.
Right.
So.
Right. And it's one that probably most people there will be using something, so yeah.
Right. And I find even if they don't have an answer, they might be intrigued that you're asking about, say, let me know what you find out. Right?
Yeah.
And then you've got something natural to circle back to them as a follow-up kind of a conversation sometimes too. Right. So yeah. The other thing is I also sometimes like to go into any networking almost like a like a little prayer almost, who can I be helpful to, because that can be a great goal as well. Not only to seek people that I'm looking for that might be helpful to me, but who could I perhaps be helpful to? I just recently, I think since we spoke last, I went to a local event here, a kind of business building for women. It was a full day event. So we had a lot of different breakouts and breaks and lunch where we had some networking opportunities. And that was part of my goal, is kind of make some local connections, but also, is there anybody that maybe I can be a help to in some way? And so that can be kind of a fun goal, not only looking for what do I need, but can I help others as well? So that was kind of fun. So having 2 or 3 goals or outcomes, I think, is tip number 1, because it sets you up to go in with a frame of mind that kind of gives you a purpose or a focus for being in that group of people. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Yeah, good.
Good way to start.
So I like to start there. And then really we're kind of touching on tip number 2, which is think about who is likely to be at the event. I know my husband just got back from a big conference, and it's one where he's gone to this conference for a number of years. So he knows people that often are going to be in attendance, and he'll even sometimes contact them ahead of time. Hey, are you planning to be at this, at the meeting? Let's get together, whether it's for dinner or a drink or whatever it is, right? And he'll look for them specifically. Some of the conferences he goes to even publish lists of attendees ahead of time. Most of the ones I've gone to tend not to do that. I wish they would. But that can be helpful, so you can even skim down and see maybe there's somebody who's with a certain organization or that you've known online or something like that. I even like to pre-set up dinners and events ahead of time with people I know are going to be there. But like I said earlier, it might be even just looking at the lineup of speakers. Is there somebody that sort of almost like gives you a mission, or a dance card, and to think of a kind of an old-fashioned metaphor, people that you might like to meet over the course of a day or two or the evening.
Yeah. So I think it seems to me like the events that are for a closed group, like maybe an association or something, those are probably more likely to post the list of who is going to attend.
Exactly.
The kinds of things that I've been at, where it's more of an open event, and maybe not everybody wants their information shared with everyone else,
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of them don't do that. So but again, kind of, know what you know about that event. One of the things is to think about, the third tip I want to share is think about what you want to take with you to the event. And the things we're talking about now, these first 2 or 3 tips, are all sort of before you go, pre-planning kinds of things. So this third one is about thinking about what material things you might take with you. And it could be all the way down to if you're going to carry it, like a shoulder bag or a tote bag or anything like that, make sure it's something that's easy to manage and juggle, because you want to be able to walk around, shake hands, maybe even have something in your hand like to drink or eat, and you want to be able to manage that really well. Also take plenty of business cards. I always encourage people to take double or triple the number that you think you're going to need, because to me, one of the worst things is to run out of cards. But also there's another little secret technique that I love to teach people, because you'll run into people, they forgot their cards, they've run out, they just, whatever. And the secret is to ask them if they'll write on the back of one of yours. So having extra cards makes that so easy. And then, of course, a pen. I suggest a non-gel type pen, because the gel ones will often smear. And again, just a regular ballpoint usually is easier for that. And ask them to write on the back with their name, their phone number, their email. And then here's the other secret. When they give it back to you, flip it over. And on the front, I draw a diagonal line through the front, so I don't mistakenly give that card to somebody else.
Yes, that's a great tip.
So that's fun. Another thing in terms of taking stuff with you, let's even talk about clothes too. And this is particularly for women more than men, but wear something that's comfortable, because if you're going to be on your feet for an hour, 2 hours in a situation, the last thing you want is for your feet to be killing you with shoes that are hurting. So I always recommend something either with a low heel or even a soft type of a sole that will be comfortable to be in. Road test them ahead of time. Don't break in a new pair of shoes at a networking event. That's the last thing you want, is to feel miserable and be hurting when you really want to be focusing on the conversations with other people. Did you find when you were going, was there anything particular that you took with you or anything that helped you just to kind of have with you while you were there?
I did. I took, and I just moved all that stuff. It was on top of my computer here, and I got it out of the way. But I have my proof copy of my book.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't gotten it completely finished yet, but I had one copy that I took
Awesome.
with me. So I was showing that off to everybody.
Beautiful.
And then I also, instead of taking business cards, I still had a bunch of bookmarks left that I had printed up before about the book. So I took those, and I had to cross off the intended publication date, but I figured they could still be used since I had the proof there that I actually was finished with it now. It just needs to get published.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And they stand out because they're not the same shape as a business card. And
that's right.
A lot of people said, oh, I always need more bookmarks. I'll take one, whether they're going to contact me or not, I don't know, but they liked the fact that it was a bookmark. So
great idea. And there are a number of little sites where you can go online and have some of those created very easily.
Yes.
Very inexpensively.
Yep. Yeah, I designed it myself in PowerPoint, which you have to change the shape of the slide and everything to work right. But yeah, and then I think I remember now who I used for the printing. It might have been Zazzle or
I think you get Canva will do things like that as well. Vistaprint. Yeah, you can upload to Vistaprint. Exactly. Yeah. Or even postcards. I know people that have printed postcards to take with them. And if you leave, the correct blank spaces, you can literally use them as postcards as well.
And mail them. Yes. That's one of the things I'm going to do next, I think, once I get the book done.
That could be one of your follow-up techniques. That's right. Perfect. Number 4, and this is also kind of in the mode of preparation, is to practice and think ahead of time about a couple of ways that you want to introduce yourself, and also a couple of conversational points that you could, like questions that you could ask. I want you to go in with a sense of confidence when you go into a networking situation. And I like to use open-ended questions, the ones that start with those W kind of questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and even how is actually great. And it might be even simple ones are, how did you find out about this event? Or how many times have you been to this event before? Something that can't be answered with just a yes, no kind of an answer is what you're really looking for. Or you can even go a little more in depth with a thought-provoking question like, what's been most useful for you so far today? Or what are you enjoying especially about the event? That's great for a conference like you're talking about, where perhaps people are just coming out of a session or have been there for a day or two. When I'm going to local events, I often ask, what other networking groups do you like to go to? That's a great question, and often will tell me about another group that I might like to know about, or what else they found helpful or interesting. And I often have another group or two that I can share with them. So that can be a real easy little conversational starter as well. That it's low pressure, easy conversation that you can have with somebody. I also even sometimes like to ask, what's an exciting project that you're working on right now? Just again, I want something a little different than just the, hey, what do you do? Or, or where do you work kind of a question. I want to know a little bit more about the person and see if I can draw them into a bit of a conversation if I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that'll be helpful, I think, for this one I'm going to next week. The one I attended recently was easier because one of the main things that this particular mentor encourages is for people to publish a book. So many of the people at the event already had written their books, and the ones who hadn't, many of them were already working on them. So that was a pretty natural conversation starter.
That's perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And like you said, you had even then a galley copy, approved copy with you, so that's perfect. Yeah. And that can be a natural conversation starter right there, that you have it in your hand. Oh, I love that. Very smart. And then sometimes I bet some of the other people did as well, perhaps, or?
Well, they had one part of the room that was divided off where anybody who was an author could have half of a table to put their stuff out. So a lot of people had their books over there. And the ones who didn't, might have copies with them, or they at least were able to talk about what they were writing and where they were in that process. So that was fun to have that starting point.
And that'd be a natural question you could ask, are you in the middle of working on a book right now, or what's your topic focus, that kind of a thing, or what would help you if you're thinking about it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that actually kind of leads into that question to ask people. I like to ask something like this: what can I keep my ears open for that might be helpful for you as I'm mixing and mingling? Is there anything that would help you right now? I try not, I don't want to just have that yes, no question, because it's too easy for them to say no. So I try to phrase it more with, that open-ended, what's something that would help you move forward right now can be a great question to ask people.
Yeah.
I like and that. It surprises people.
Saying, is there anything I can help you with? And then they say no.
Right. Because I want them to think about it a little bit. Yeah. And you can also leave it like that as you're parting, if there's, any way we can help each other, I hope let's stay in touch, right? So,
yes.
And sometimes at that point, you want to think about a gracious way to think about trading cards. And sometimes I'll say something like, let's stay in touch. Do you want to trade a card? Mm-hmm. So that's just so I don't necessarily do it right up front unless they have their card ready to go and want to trade it earlier. I'll do that. But usually I'll wait till we're into the conversation just a little bit and say something like that. Hey, let's stay in touch. I've enjoyed talking with you. Let's trade a card. Would you like to? And I mean, they're not going to say no usually, but it's a courtesy to ask,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so the next tip I want to go to, they're kind of related, is think about how will you talk about what you do? Because a natural question a lot of people will ask you is, so what do you do? And so sometimes it's fun to come up either with a creative answer or an answer that fits for the event that you're attending. For example, if that one had a lot of focus on writing and books, you might say, well, I'm right in the middle of writing my next book about whatever. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to give the standard answer, the same answer every time or every place that you go. Another good little phrase is to use something like this to say, I'm really passionate about, like, helping people who, like I sometimes like to say, I'm really passionate about helping people figure out their next professional step to move forward, as opposed to saying, well, I'm a coach, because there's so many different kinds of coaches, and I do more than that. I teach classes, I'm developing informational products, and it would be weird to make a big long list of those things. I also have written books. So sometimes focusing on what I'm passionate about at the moment, or even a project I'm thinking about right now, that can be a fun way to kind of answer that, and that'll also provoke a conversation a little bit. How did you introduce yourself at the conference? Was there any particular way, Susan?
I don't think I was really using one standard answer. Okay. It seemed to be, some people would come up and talk to me when I was over at the book table, even though I didn't have books to sell. I had my one copy and I had my bookmarks. Okay. So people would come up and ask me. So they already knew that I had a book, and they would ask me what it was about and things like that. So,
right.
Other times, I would talk more about what my current focus is for providing services, or I talked quite a bit with people about the pilot series of webinars that I had just finished before the event. So.
That makes sense. That's good. Yeah, something that's a sort of a current project, something mm-hmm. that you're thinking about or working on, that can be really, I think, a great thing. The another kind of related thing like this is you can, if this kind of goes back to that comfort level for people that are perhaps a little more introverted or feeling a little shy, or maybe you feel totally new to the group, is when you first are going into a group, sometimes look around and see if there's anybody else that looks like they're not walking in with somebody, or they're looking around, like, sometimes that's a clue that they're new to the event as well. And that can be a great person to go over and talk to. And most of the time they'll be really glad that somebody's approached them to start a conversation, and it gives you an easy place to start. And so look around near the entrance, or even sometimes around sort of the side of the room, you'll see somebody standing by themselves, rather than trying to break into, maybe there's an already established groups, little groups mixing and mingling with themselves already. Then look for the person who's by themselves and go over to them. Also, another little tip I like to suggest is go early or stay late, or both. If you're going to go to an event, you're already dressed, you're there, you may have even paid money to be at the event. So you might as well, I kind of feel like if I'm getting my energy ready to go, I might as well really make the most of the event. So if you're able to go early or stay late, sometimes that's easier ways to get to meet people because there's fewer people in the crowd at that point, and you can sometimes have some of the best conversations that way as well. So just that's sort of a little, again, I don't think I've ever seen anybody suggest that. That's one of my favorite little secret tips.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay. I think we might go into the next tip, which we talked a little bit about kind of what to take and what to wear. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. We talked about shoes and tote bags, but I also want to encourage you to think about what you're going to do while you're at the event as far as food and drink, because you want to have your right hand available for handshakes. And so one thing to do is if you're going to have something to drink, carry it in your left hand, because that way it keeps the right hand, warm and dry. You don't want to have to juggle hands either and say, wait a minute, it's awkward. So sort of pre-think that. I'll even sometimes not even get something to drink at an event just because I don't want to have to juggle it, or I'll get something before and afterwards. But I may not even try to do a little tray of a plate of food either for the same reason. I'd rather just focus on being there to network and maybe take a break and go get something to eat or drink for a minute and then circle back into the networking. It'll be a little bit simpler. So that can, I think, sometimes make a real difference. Just sort of pre-think logistically what's going to be easier for you in terms of the networking process. And then really, number 7, we ought to talk a little bit about follow-up. What to do after the event. And this is one where I don't know about you, but I sometimes fall down on this one. It's a very easy one. You're on to the next project or the next event. And so one of the secrets is to go ahead and do a little pre-planning for that. And it could be, there's several ways to follow up. One is you can make a quick phone call. And I usually suggest look through the cards when you walk out, however many people that you've met, but take a minute and sort through and pick the top 3 or 4 cards of people that you really feel like was a good connection for you, and plan, even if that's all you follow up with is 3 or 4, that's all right. The others, if you can get it to them, great. And you can even pick through and say, some of these, I just don't feel like it's my top priority to follow up. That's all right. You can reach out on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever your favorite ones are within your realm, and send an invitation, obviously.
I have connected with some people there, so and I was realizing how much easier that is now than it used to be.
Yes. You can send a quick email. You can also call and leave a voicemail, and it can be as simple as, hey, it was really great to meet you at whatever the event was. I really enjoyed our conversation about whatever. I'd love to stay in touch, or even go ahead and say, I'd love to plan a time to get together for coffee if it's somebody in your local area, that kind of a thing, or invite them to something can be a great opportunity. You can even use the old-fashioned, actually send something in the mail. Because it's not done very often, it will often stand out. And so I always like to even bring with me, if I'm traveling like you were to your event, take 2 or 3, take a little set of note cards and stamps and address labels with you. And even, in your room at the end of the day, while it's fresh on your mind, maybe write out 2 or 3 of those and go ahead and address them and put the stamp on, even, maybe mail them on your way home or as soon as you get back, or at the airport, that kind of thing. And that way you have a way to connect. So again, just like with don't set a giant goal to meet a lot of people, set yourself a reasonable goal for the follow-up side of it as well.
Yeah, that's important, because I know some of the big events I used to go to a few years ago, I would come back with a big stack of cards from these mega networking sessions, and then I would at least set aside the people who I knew were not good leads for me, but then I'd have a big stack of them, and then I'd be trying to send a card to every one of those and thank them for, it's just like sometimes I just would never get to the end of them. So I'd run out of energy before I got them all done. So.
Well, I want to give you total permission to be very selective and just pick a handful, okay?
Yes. That's where I was appreciating how much easier it is now, that it seems more acceptable to do that on social media than it did 4 or 5 years ago,
And you can even, like you at a multi-day event like you're at, you can go back to the room at night and go ahead and do some of that social connecting
That's
then.
right.
Again, while it's fresh on your mind. You don't have to wait till you're back home and on to the next thing.
Right.
So, yeah. Any questions or anything else I can especially talk to that would be helpful for you or your listeners, do you think?
I can't think of anything. I mean, I just am really pleased with the way you make this so organized and so logical, and it just makes a lot of sense to me. There are things that seem very common sense, and yet I never thought of them.
Well,
So
thank
I
you. I appreciate
appreciate that
that.
you've put them all together in such a
Yeah. Well,
nice structure.
thank you. Well, so often, when I'm coaching professionals to help them be successful in their careers or in their businesses, networking is a key skill in that arena. So I always like to teach them some ways to be effective and, in fact, encourage them to always kind of have a little bit of their time devoted to networking and to have then some practical strategies like this that help them. Because no matter what project, what business, what career or profession you're in, your network is a big part of your success with that. So I'm
Definitely.
thrilled to be able to share some of these ideas with you.
Yeah, it's really all about building relationships with people, and networking is a good way to do that. I will say I feel like I did a better job at this last event of remembering to ask the other person more questions about themselves. Because I get nervous, and sometimes once I start talking, I just end up answering their questions about me, and then I forget to stop and ask them. So I think I did a much better job of that now.
That's great. Well, congratulations. And I hope that
Thank
your
you.
next event that's coming up, you'll be able to try a couple more of these little tricks and tips. One thing that I found as an introvert is if I could put my focus more on asking a good question and listening, that took some of the pressure off of me to have something to say all the time.
Right.
And so that'd be my encouragement to you. Have 3 or 4 questions ready to go and just be a great listener. And you can even do follow-ups and say, tell me more about that, or that's really intriguing, to draw them out even a little bit more.
Yep.
And most people are pleased to have a good listener. So
yes, and that's what I kept reminding myself, is that's what they always say, is that people love to talk about themselves. So give them an opportunity to
let
do
them.
that, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Well, how much
yes.
fun is that? I can't wait to hear. I hope you'll let me know, as you're trying some more of these out, which ones are working for
I
you.
will definitely do that.
It'd be a great pleasure to hear it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your great tips, Leslie, and for being a guest on my show.
I'm so glad I could share them. Thank you, Susan.
And if once we get done, if you would, when I send you the link for the recording, if you want to go and make a comment out there too, that would be great. Let people know maybe how to get in touch with you if they.
Oh, I'd like that very much. Thank you.
Follow up. Oh, and you had something you were going to share too, right? That we're going to make a download available to them or put it on the website.
Yes, I will.
These tips.
I'd be really pleased to do that. I've got a little handout with a tip sheet, checklist kind of tip sheet that I think will summarize some of these tips and even offer a little more detail.
Great. So we'll put that up under the recording as well.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for listening to Creative Marketing TV.